And now I'm going to bring us to another understanding. And this is going to take us close to our conclusion. And I'm, again, having fun with this. But the conclusion is I look back into all the great traditions, the Taoist tradition, the Torah tradition, Genesis tradition, in other words, which Jews and Christians share, the Vedic traditions. They all talk about a galactic summer. And I'll add the Sumerian traditions too. So, and now this goes to the one of the misinformation, I'm going to say, that there's no evidence of any live food or vegan cultures. There's plenty of evidence. So we go back to galactic summer, and we see that when the flood took place from the time of Adam, it was approximately 1,600 years, give or take 50 years. Okay. And then we look at the Torah descriptions, dividing of the waters. You had waters in the earth, but you had waters in the atmosphere. And what you had was an optimal hothouse, greenhouse. And what people ate, remember the Sumerian and also the Genesis thing was a live food diet, okay? What people ate was directly vegetation. It was like in front of you everywhere. It was optimal situation. And then something began to happen. The world began to dry out. And eventually result in a flood. But in that drying out process, and we'll talk about different things, but Nephilim, the giants, and also the people began to degenerate. And actually there was great death and destruction because they couldn't eat their food. Vegetation was running out. They turned to cannibalism, and they turned to a variety of other things, and then the flood came and erased the whole thing. And then at the time of Noah, and Noah represents, I'm going to say, genetic change. He was born without webbed hands. He was actually born with clear fingers. And then at that point, for those people who couldn't, genetically kind of hold it, there was a dispensation to you could eat meat. Okay, but don't say that was an order; it was a dispensation. And so what we have is of history now, at least in all Middle East, perhaps in the whole world, where people were vegan, live fooders for at least 1,600 years. And that's a very important statement because it flies in the face of people saying, wow, you don't have any history of that. Well, we do have a history. And it's true in the Vedas, and we know the rishis were live fooders, and the Taoists were live fooders. And so there were these cultures that did do well. So I want to kind of point that out. So we have the Torah tradition, Sumerian tradition, the Taoist tradition, and the Vedic tradition, all supporting the teachings of a live food organic diet. And I'm going to make a little comment, and this is where things get confused. Dr. Williams talked about in a Buddhist monastery, and they occasionally would have a little meat or chicken. And there was a time, and this is the thing I really want people to get, as the weather changes, and if you're living up in Tibet, you got to make a compromise to the essential Buddhist teaching was, again, if you eat, sentient beings. In fact, what Buddha said, there'll be a time in the future where ghosts will come, bricksharks will come and tell you can eat meat and get liberated. He says, it's a lie. Okay, I just summarized it, but that's the 98% accurate quote. But people had to compromise. Now, the Dalai Lama in 2005 actually came out again and said all Buddhists need to be vegan again. Now, I want to point out that even though there wasn't some exceptions maybe 30 years ago because they were trying to deal with the complexity. Now, I want to bring something that I think Dr. Williams' research is really interesting in this picture, is that he found that some people are almost eating high-fat, high-meat diet, like Eskimos. Well, we're not Eskimos, but it makes a point. And in Peru, they're eating a high-complex carbohydrate diet. 99% vegetarian diet. Okay. So what we need to see is that weather of the earth has affected diet and affected our survival. So we have the example of the Great Galactic Summer, 1600 years of the vegetarian eating. And I want to say in there, this is another society that Herodotus, the father of history, okay, he said that he mentioned the Pelagasians. And he said these people lived on average of 200 years, and they're 100% live food. And I don't know how many thousands of years they lived, but I thought that's interesting. I went to research it up, and I actually went to Greece, and the Pelagasians are in southern Greece, and that is the teaching. So that's another culture. A third culture is the Essenes. I want to make this clear, that in most of our societies you have the outer and inner circles. And the outer circles of the Essene were vegetarian, okay? But the inner circles, such as Jesus, who was acknowledged by the Pope as being Essene directly in 2007, he said Jesus before the crucifixion actually had the Last Supper in an Essene house. And that's about as close as you're going to get them to admit that. And my point is that the inner circle were live food, and the inner circles just had water, okay? And the inner circles were on air. And that's where you got Moses and Jesus going 40 days without food and water. I actually went to where Jesus did the 40 days without food and water on a cliff over Jericho. It's like, that's one hot place. You know, it's like, how do they do that? But you're dealing at the inner level of very high spiritual energies to be able to be, you know, a superconductor of the divine. Remember, my diet is about superconductor of the divine. That's the key to whole person enlightenment. But I'm trying to make another statement, is that according to the times, people will adjust their diet. So if you say, well, you know, 20,000 years ago we had the Ice Age, and therefore we're all should be eating meat. That was the right diet for that time. Nah, you didn't have vegetables. And so the remnant of that is in Alaska, Ice Age. People find that concept. But you go into Peru and around the equator, they didn't have an Ice Age. That was north. You know, where I lived, Lake Michigan, that was all from the glaciers. Okay, so we had an Ice Age, but down in Central America, they didn't. So they're having different diets, and they didn't have to make that adoption. So this is, I want you to really hear, this is the key. So the key thing that we're really talking about, that I, again, think Daniel Vidal's trying to make it clear, is that you really have we're at a bifurcation point in history. Okay? At one level, we can go backwards and survival of the fittest, and the plant's going to die, and people aren't going to have enough food, and that's what, you know, Daniel Vidal is clearly talking about. It's a survivalist, me first, survival of the fittest. It doesn't have morals, it doesn't have ethics, okay? And it's looking to the past, the nostalgia of the past. What do we have in the past? Okay, well, we'll go. And then the other diet, which is more suggested by myself and Bill Tuttle, is a diet for the healing of humanity, the diet for the healing and repair of the planet, the diet of the healing of repair of really all of creation. And that is going to be your plant source only diet. So Dr. Williams said a very interesting thing. He said, he's a meat eater, okay? It has dairy too. He said, in the future, because he got the principle, and this is just what he said on his own, I didn't prompt him, is that we really need to go to a vegetarian diet and a vegan diet, because that, I don't want to put words in his mouth, that's the diet that can heal the planet. That's roughly what he said. And that's the bigger picture. So we have a bifurcation in choice. We have one that goes back to the past, and I will tell you that the meat-eating diet, the Pharaoh diet, is a nostalgic diet of the past that only a few people will do. And when you look back to the past, it's as extinct as slavery, polygamy, oppression of women, and cannibalism. That's the past. I'm saying it's extinct as the dinosaurs. Okay? And that's the point I'm making. It's not a diet of the future. It's not even a diet of the present. And what Dr. Williams is saying, what I'm clearly saying, and what the vegan world isn't exactly saying, but they should be saying from a spiritual point of view, is we want a diet that will repair the planet and repair humanity. and be the diet of not only the present, but the diet that ushers in the Messianic times. And that is going to be and is a plant source only diet.